When I was 17, I got the acceptance letter I had been dreaming of my whole life. A full admission to one of the top universities in the country. It wasn't just any acceptance. It was the university, the one I had spent years working for, staying up late studying, sacrificing weekends for extra classes, and building every inch of my resume to impress. It felt like everything had finally paid off. I still remember running into the living room with the letter in my hand, shouting, "For my parents." They were sitting at the kitchen table with my older brother Kevin, flipping through some papers. At first, I thought they'd be thrilled, that they'd hug me, celebrate with me, maybe even cry proud tears. But instead, they just looked at each other, not smiling, not clapping, just exchanging a weird, silent glance. That night, they sat me down for a talk. They explained that while they were so proud of me, the family was facing unexpected financial challenges. Kevin, apparently, had some tuition fees that had stacked up faster than they had anticipated. If he didn't finish his final year, all the money they had already spent on him would be wasted. And since Kevin was so close to graduating and starting a real career, they said it made more sense to prioritize his education. In other words, I would have to give up my dream for his. I sat there, stunned, feeling like someone had ripped the ground from under me. I had done everything right. I had earned this. But none of it mattered, because Kevin needed money and I was expendable. They promised it would be just a delay. That once Kevin graduated and got a good job, they'd help me go back to school. They smiled like it was a perfectly reasonable compromise, like I should be grateful for even having a spot at the table. I was too shocked to even argue. And so, while Kevin went off to finish his degree at a fancy private university, I stayed home. I picked up part-time jobs. I watched my friends leave for new cities, new adventures, while I stayed stuck, pretending that it didn't crush me every single day. Fast forward 6 years. Kevin graduated, sure. But did he get a good job? Nope. He bounced from one dead-end internship to another, refusing to settle for anything that didn't scream CEO-level salary. Meanwhile, I kept working. I managed to scrap together a decent life. Not the life I dreamed of, but one built with my own hands. I barely spoke to my parents during those years. I didn't visit much. Every conversation was laced with guilt-tripping or subtle digs about how I chose not to go back to school, like it had been some whim of mine and not something they forced on me. I learned to live without them. And then, just when I thought they couldn't possibly ask more of me, the call came. Kevin was getting married. Mom's voice was bright and chirpy on the phone, like we were still the picture-perfect family. She said they were so excited, and that they wanted to throw him and his fiancée a wedding to remember. And then she dropped the real bomb. They needed my help to pay for it. Apparently, Kevin and his fiancée wanted a proper celebration, a huge venue, gourmet catering, designer flowers. But after all the years of supporting Kevin, my parents didn't have enough savings left. Would I mind pitching in? Just a few $1,000s, Mom said sweetly. After all, she added, family supports family. I hung up without saying a word. I sat on my couch, phone in hand, heart pounding. In my ears, family supports family. Where was that family support when I needed it? Where was that understanding when they crushed my dreams without a second thought? I remembered the nights I cried myself to sleep while Kevin partied through college. I remembered the humiliation of telling my friends I wasn't going away to university after all. I remembered every time my parents made me feel like my dreams were disposable. And now they wanted me to help pay for Kevin's fairy tale wedding? Not a chance. I decided right, then and there. I was done being the backup plan. After that phone call, I didn't answer any texts from my parents for days. I didn't answer when they tried to call again, or when Kevin himself sent me a half-hearted message that just said, "Hey, heard Mom talk to you. Let's chat." As if this was all casual. as if asking me to fork over thousands of dollars. For a wedding I wasn't even sure I wanted to attend was no big deal. I was angrier than I had been in years. And the thing about anger is, once you stop suppressing it, once you let yourself feel it, it bubbles up and won't go back down. All those memories I had shoved deep down started rising to the surface again. I remembered my parents telling me that sacrifices had to be made for the good of the family, and how somehow the only person ever making sacrifices was me. I remembered sitting alone in my room when Kevin came home for holidays, bragging about his new friends, his wild parties, his freedom, while I worked double shifts just to keep gas in my car. Now they wanted me to pretend none of it had happened? Not this time. When I finally answered my mom's call, I didn't even let her launch into another fake sweet sales pitch. I said, "No," just that. A simple word. A word I had never said to them before, without immediately feeling guilty, without immediately folding. She went quiet on the line. I could hear the shock through the silence. Finally, she said, "You're being very selfish. After everything we did for you." I almost laughed. Everything they did for me. They crushed my dreams. They used my future to prop up Kevin's. But of course, in their version of the story, they were the heroes. I told her calmly that I wished Kevin and his fiancée the best. Truly, I did. But that I wouldn't be contributing a single penny toward the wedding. And honestly, I wasn't even sure if I would attend. That set off a firestorm. Suddenly, I was getting calls and texts from every family member under the sun. Aunts, uncles, cousins I barely even knew. Everyone piling on, saying I was tearing the family apart, that I was being cold, heartless, cruel. Some of the messages weren't even subtle. One aunt wrote, "If you don't show up and support Kevin, don't bother showing your face at Christmas." It stung. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. For a moment, I wondered if I was being too harsh. Maybe I could scrape together a small gift. Maybe I could show up, fake a smile, keep the peace. It would be easier than being the villain. But then, I thought about all the times I needed them, and they weren't there when I got my acceptance letter and nobody celebrated. When I spent my 18th birthday alone, because Kevin needed a family dinner before he left for a summer internship. When I sat alone at a cheap community college library, piecing together night classes while Kevin traveled across Europe on study abroad trips, all paid for by the same parents who said they couldn't afford my education. No, I wasn't going to light myself on fire to keep them warm anymore. So I sent one final message in the family group chat. "I love you all, but I'm done being treated like I don't matter. I'm not paying for Kevin's wedding. I'm not attending the celebration, and I'm not apologizing for choosing myself this time." And then, I muted the chat. For the first time in my life, I chose me. I didn't check my phone for the rest of the night. Instead, I made a simple dinner, curled up with a book I had been meaning to read, and went to bed without the crushing weight of their expectations hanging over me. It felt strange. It felt terrifying. It also felt free. I didn't know what the fallout would be. Maybe they would cut me off completely. Maybe they'd spend years painting me as the villain in every family story. Maybe they'd never even try to understand why. I had to walk away. But for the first time, I realized that wasn't my responsibility anymore. The days that followed were strangely quiet. No calls, no texts, no unexpected knocks at my door. At first, I thought maybe they had finally gotten the message. Maybe my parents and Kevin realized they couldn't guilt-trip me into submission this time. But deep down, I knew my family too well. Silence wasn't surrender. It was just the calm before the storm. Sure enough, about a week later, I got a letter in the mail. An actual, physical letter. Who even did that anymore? It was from my mom. The handwriting on the envelope looked rushed, almost angry. I hesitated before opening it, half tempted to just toss it in the trash. But curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a 3-page letter front and back, absolutely dripping with passive-aggressive guilt. She wrote about how much she and Dad had sacrificed for me and Kevin, how hard it had been for them to divide resources fairly, how I was blessed to have parents who cared enough to ensure Kevin succeeded, even if it meant making tough choices. Tough choices. That was how she described bulldozing my future to clear a path for my brother. She ended the letter by saying she hoped I would do the right thing and support. The family at Kevin's wedding, no apology. No acknowledgement of how deeply they had hurt me. Just a final push to fall back into line. I sat at my kitchen table, the letter crumpled in my hand, feeling the old familiar wave of guilt rise up inside me. But I fought it back. They could twist the story however they wanted, but I knew the truth. I wasn't the one who abandoned the family. They abandoned me the moment they decided my dreams were expendable. I put the letter down and didn't respond. A few days later, the guilt campaign kicked into high gear. Kevin's fiancée Rachel messaged me directly. "Hey," she wrote, all fake chirpy. "Kevin's really hurt that you're not helping out. It's a huge day for us. He looks up to you, you know." I almost laughed out loud. Kevin looked up to me. This was the same brother who barely acknowledged me at family gatherings unless he needed something. This was the same brother who once borrowed my car without asking and returned it 2 days later with an empty tank and a mysterious new dent. Didn't even bother replying. I knew what was happening. They didn't miss me. They missed what I could give them. Money, support, obedience. When I stopped providing those things, suddenly I was selfish and toxic. I wondered how they would spin this to the rest of the extended family. Probably some story about how I was unstable, or ungrateful, or holding on to old grudges. Let them talk. I was done living for their approval. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, I got updates through the grapevine. Apparently, my absence was causing a lot of drama behind the scenes. A few older relatives, the ones who had quietly supported me over the years, sent me private messages of encouragement. 1. Aunt, my dad's sister, wrote, "I'm proud of you for standing your ground. You deserved better, and we all know it." It was a small thing, but it meant the world. Meanwhile, my parents tried a new tactic, pretending like everything was fine. They posted endless Facebook updates about family unity and celebrating love, tagging Kevin and Rachel in every other post. Not once did they mention me. Not once did they acknowledge the rift. It was like I had been erased. For a moment, that realization stung deeper than anything else. But then I realized something. I wasn't the one who walked away. They had pushed me out a long time ago. I was just finally choosing to stop chasing after people who made it clear I was never their priority. The night of Kevin's wedding, I stayed home. No fancy clothes. No big plans. I ordered pizza. I put on a movie I loved. I curled up on the couch with my dog and let the quiet fill the space where old guilt used to live. Somewhere, in a fancy venue, my brother was probably dancing and laughing and pretending our family was whole. Let him. I had mourned the loss of that fantasy long ago. Now, I was building something real, a life that didn't require me to shrink myself down to be loved, a life where saying no wasn't a betrayal, but an act of self-respect, a life where I got to be my own first priority. For once, I wasn't the family's scapegoat. I wasn't the invisible background character in Kevin's success story. I was the main character in my own life. And honestly, it felt pretty damn good. Weeks passed after the wedding, and I didn't hear a word from my parents or Kevin, not even a text. It was as if I had been officially excommunicated from the family. Honestly, I thought I'd feel worse, lonelier, maybe even regretful. But the truth was, I felt free. For the first time in my life, I wasn't tangled up in the endless cycle of disappointment and guilt they had wrapped around me like a second skin. I poured that energy into myself, into my work, my hobbies, my friendships. I even started looking into night classes again, something affordable but meaningful, because even if I hadn't gone to my dream college, it wasn't too late to keep learning and building my own future. One Saturday afternoon, as I sat reading, on my porch, my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. For a moment, I thought about ignoring it, but something told me to answer. I picked up and said hello. There was a pause, and then my mother's voice, tight, brittle, came. Through the line. "Hi, it's Mom." I stayed silent. She continued, her voice wavering. "Your father, he had a small heart attack last week." The words hit me like a sudden gust of cold wind. I swallowed hard, unsure what to feel. Before I could even respond, she rushed on. "He's okay. He's home now. But things are a little tight, with the hospital bills, and we were wondering if you could maybe help out, just a little, for your father." There it was. The real reason she was calling. Not because they missed me, not because they realized how much damage they had done, but because they needed me. Again, the old instincts kicked in, that desperate, aching need to be useful, to be loved, to prove I was worthy. But I didn't let them take over this time. I took a slow breath and asked, "Why not ask Kevin?" Silence. Could almost hear her blinking in shock on the other end. Kevin's got the wedding expenses. "He's busy," she stammered. Of course he was. Kevin always had an excuse, and somehow I was always expected to be the safety net, even after they threw me away. Even after they made it crystal clear that my dreams, my happiness, my future, they were all expendable. I could hear my mother breathing, waiting for my answer. Maybe, somewhere in her heart, she knew what was coming. "I'm sorry Dad's not well," I said finally, voice calm, steady. "But I can't help you." There was a long, stunned pause, then a sharp, wounded breath. "I see," she said coldly. "I guess we know where we stand now." And then she hung up. I sat there for a long time after the call ended. Not crying, not shaking, just still. Because she was right, we did know where we stood now. I wasn't the disposable afterthought anymore. I was someone who could say no. Someone who could choose peace over family loyalty, when that loyalty came at the cost of my own dignity. In the months that followed, I kept building my life. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't picture perfect. But it was mine. I enrolled in classes I loved. I made new friends who valued me for who I was, not what I could do for them. I even started saving up for a solo trip, something I'd always dreamed about, but never dared to actually plan before. Every so often, I would hear about my family through distant relatives. Kevin and Rachel were having money troubles. My parents were stressed and tired, juggling too much with too little. I felt a flicker of sadness sometimes, a whisper of the old longing to belong. But it never lasted long, because I finally understood something. Family isn't who demands from you. Family is who stands beside you, who cheers for you, who sacrifices with you, not for you. And sometimes, family is the one you build, not the one you're born into. One evening, as I sat watching the sunset from my porch, I thought about the scared, small version of myself I had once been. The kid who gave up everything without a fight, hoping that maybe, someday, they'd see his worth. I wished I could tell that kid, "You are already enough. You don't have to keep bleeding to earn love." And then, I smiled to myself, feeling lighter than I had in years. Because now I wasn't waiting for anyone else to see my worth. I already knew it, and no one, not my parents, not Kevin, not anyone, could ever take that away from me again.